excited to have him back. So thank you for coming.
Great. Thank you, Katie. Folks, just like I do teach at Concordia University Wisconsin. My primary area is computer science, and this just reminds me of that. I mean, I pack them in there too. They just can't wait to get, oh, maybe not exactly like that. But I do teach both computer science and science there. And I just want to allay your fears. I know there's a handout, and some folks are already concerned about the tests that might be upcoming and other kinds of things. And there really won't be, not at all. But, you know, science is kind of extremely interesting, at least to me. And I do oftentimes like to investigate that. I also try to make it such that it's understandable. Sometimes I probably go overboard with that. Not too long ago in class, I decided I better review some of the things we were talking about the previous time. We were talking about chemistry. And I asked one of the students, can you tell me the chemical formula for water? And the student said, absolutely. H-I-J-K-L-M-N-O. And I said, what the heck are you talking about? Well, last time you said it's H2O. I'm going to keep doing those until you really laugh. Another thing that's interesting to think about in science is just some of the distances involved in space. So I usually try to talk about distances on Earth with students too, and again I was doing a little review the next day, and I asked one student, which is further away, Florida or the moon? And she said, duh, can you see Florida from here? Okay, that's better. That's better. Okay, maybe I'll let you slide this time. Oh, now people are feeling badly for my students. Thank you. Folks, I want to thank Northwestern Publishing House for providing this venue for me, and Katie and the rest of the staff for being so gracious in putting up with me for this. And thank you very much for being here. This is a very interesting topic because normally when you hear fossils, most people are a little afraid of those, especially Christians, and especially Christians who might accept creation. Because we've heard since we've been very small that fossils and evolution go hand in hand. I mean, if I asked you to free associate and said, well, fossils, what do you think of? I mean, many people would say evolution. One type of fossil specifically, if we talk about dinosaurs, then it always comes, oh yeah, okay, evolution. Now, what I want to share with you is the fossils actually provide strong evidence for creation. There is no reason to be concerned when folks start talking about fossils, because fossils actually provide very strong evidence for creation. Now, before I forget, when we're done, there's a couple things. Oh, don't get excited. We're nowhere near done. But when we are done, I do have a number of fossils up here, and I'd like you to come up and take a look at these things. It's no fun having them if I can't share them. Some of them are a little fragile, so you just be a little careful with them. But the other thing I do have is I have some fossils for you to take with you. I probably don't have enough for everybody, so if we start off with one per family, I have about 50 some odd here. There might be a little more than that. But be sure to come up and take one, because what I'm going to ask you to do when you leave here, your homework is to share that fossil and start a conversation. Okay? Let me give you some ideas on how to do that as we move through. There is a convenient handout that Northwestern put together for you. And the nice thing about the first two sides, the first full sheet there is my notes. The second one are some resources. And the nice thing about having that is you know when we're getting close to the end. Okay? So you'll be sad. When I speak on this subject, and I do this every so often, the one thing that I want folks to remember, what I want you to take with you, is creation is reasonable. When you listen to other broadcasts and read other things on this, many people will try to make it as if creation is a totally ridiculous unsubstantiated idea. Out on the resource table, one of the things Northwestern Publishing House has is a recent debate between Ken Ham and Bill Nye. Unfortunately, some of you may recognize the name Bill Nye. He's the so-called science guy. He cannot stand the fact that some people like me talk about the creation model. As a matter of fact, Bill Nye has said point blank, teaching children about creation is equivalent to child abuse. This is bad for education. It's bad for science. It's bad for America. But you know what? Evolution is actually the unreasonable position here. Creation is the reasonable position. So let me share that with you. But to understand what I'm going to talk to you about today, you have to think within the creation model. Even sometimes as Christians, we start listening to what PBS says, we start reading National Geographic, we start listening to other scientists, and we think, well, those are really smart people. They must really know. You know, they don't really know. One thing I've discovered about scientists is they're sort of like me. They're people. And I begin most of my courses at Concordia University by telling my students two key things. Number one, I don't know everything. And number two, I make mistakes. I need to do that the first day because I usually demonstrate that by the second day. Scientists are like that too. They're not special. They are women and men just like you and I. And just like you and I, they sometimes carry biases with them. Bill Nye is not a committed Christian. And that worldview that he has definitely colors and taints his interpretation of the fossil record along with everything else. So let's think within the model. If you don't know where the ideas of creation and fossils come from, well, they do come from the Bible. As a matter of fact, in a little bit, in Genesis 1 is creation, and Genesis 6 through 9 is how much of the fossil record was created. The advantage that I have as a scientist is I know someone who was there and had a written record of it. God's Word reveals what's happened in both creation and the development of the fossil record. It makes it a lot easier to investigate when you have a reliable eyewitness. So, what's a fossil? Easy definition. A fossil is either the remains or evidence of a once living creature. A fossil is either the remains or the evidence of a once living creature. The word itself, fossil, literally means dug up, something that you dug up out of the ground. Now, interestingly today, some scientists change that definition a little bit. They add something. A fossil has to be something from, quote, prehistory, something that is millions of years old. I see no reason to add that to the definition at all. As a matter of fact, the fossils that I have up here are not millions of years old, and I'll give you the scientific evidence to support that in a little bit. A fossil is just something that was dug up. Fossils could either represent the creature itself, that's a trilobite. I didn't bring along my really nice one for some reason, but here's an old ugly one, so you can come up here and look at that anytime you want to. These things kind of feel like rock. And when you get your own fossil, you're going to say, these things kind of feel like rocks. And the reason why is because they have changed into rocks. Sometimes the creature itself is no longer there. We just have the evidence that it once existed. But a fossil could also be the evidence of it. In this case, you see a theropod, a dinosaur footprint. That can also be considered a fossil. Question. How are fossils formed? You know what? Everybody says the same thing. Everybody tells the same story, whether you accept evolution or accept creation. Fossils are all, we know how fossils are formed. Fossils require rapid burial in a lot of sediment. and that sediment is more often than not carried by water. To create a fossil requires rapid burial in lots of sediment. Sorry, I have to wander. I don't know what that is. Okay, it must be a genetic flaw here, but and when I have to wander in front of the projector, then it just makes life really difficult. But then I can see some folks out there. How you doing? Fossils are formed by water. Now, when a creature dies, let's say, in the 17th, 18th, even 19th century, during the westward expansion of the United States, unfortunately a lot of buffalo and bison were killed and just left on the plains of the West. Those things did not turn into fossils. If an animal dies and just hangs out, scavengers take care of it and it decomposes. The way to form a fossil is that creature is either alive when it's buried or shortly after it's died, it is buried. So what we see in the fossil record is basically an immense graveyard formed by a cataclysmic event. As a matter of fact, my evolutionary friends will also tell you that, yes, there was some kind of flood that caused this. Now, for my evolutionary friends, that's, local floods just in regions, and they happen all the time. But for me, there was one big flood. Here's how it happens. So, first of all, here's our Triceratops. And by the way, here's one of the horns from a Triceratops. Now, before you get too impressed, I need to share a secret with you. Scientists don't usually tell this. Some of my fossils here are casts. They're not real. Okay? If this was, by the way, I do have access to the real material, but we're really careful with that. Most of what you see, even when you go into the Milwaukee Public Museum, you see those big dinosaurs? That's not real material there. It's molded, modeled from the real material, but that's the actual size of it. So first of all, it's quickly buried underwater. It was either just recently died or maybe the flood itself caused the death of this organism. And it's not just that it's underwater. This water is carrying sediment. It's carrying a lot of stuff. And all that stuff is now going to bury the organism. Then what we need is quite a bit of stuff. We need more pressure here. And then after the sediment has pressed on the object, after a while, mineralization happens, and that's sometimes called the fossilization process. So the same minerals that make water hard, those minerals seep in here. They actually replace the organic material, like in the shell here, with some minerals, and that's the fossil. Sometime later, it's uncovered, and there you have it. Now, I know you can't read this from where you're at, but this is the standard plaque in the Field Museum of Natural History. By the way, the Field Museum of Natural History does not support creation. Everything they talk about there is geared to evolution. But this is what they say how a fossil is formed. Find a dead plant or animal. Bury the body quickly in mud and wet sand so it won't be damaged by scavengers. It has to be buried rapidly. Water helps. It carries lots of material. You bet. Keep piling on the sand and mud until they start compressing the solid rock. Let water creep in. Now, the only thing I disagree about this is the period of time. Over time, thousands, fine, or millions, doesn't take that long. Then you have a fossil, you dig it up, and you have a look. Everybody knows that fossils are formed in the same way, and that way is catastrophic, cataclysmic water action. How long does it take to form a fossil? Some of you may have seen this image before. We have two fossil fish here. Can you tell what's happening? One is in the midst of eating the other one. How long did it take this fossil to form? Oh, thousands of years. No. Okay? That process happened rapidly, quickly, catastrophically, right? The one is ready to have a meal, and suddenly it was buried quickly by sediment. Now, sometimes people say, well, okay, that happened quickly, but you see, that was a long, long time ago. Well, yeah, but some of you think, I've been around a long, long time. You know, it gets a little bad when I discover I'm actually older than some of the fossils I carry around with. That's bad news here. Anybody want to guess what this is? Oh, saber-tooth, that's a great guess. Tiger tooth, good guess. You got big tigers around here. It's bigger than one of your ribs, by the way. Okay? This is a tooth from a Tyrannosaurus. Okay? That about where my hand is the gum line, so you can see. Now again, don't get excited because real Tyrannosaurus did not have a stamp from the South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. Okay? But here it is. Now you know. This object, and I'm sorry for the poor image of it, but you can sort of see the pebbly surface. You could see the orangish color. If I had it, and I don't, I would show it to you. And when you looked at it, you would think, this looks like an orange. And you're right. At one time, it was an orange. Today, it is a fossil. It is hard as a rock. Now, this fossil orange was discovered in Australia. Say so. Orange trees are not, citrus trees in general, are not indigenous to Australia. We know exactly when orange groves were first cultivated in Australia, the early part to the mid part of the 19th century. So oranges have not existed in Australia for more than 150 years. How old is that fossil? No more than 150 years. Does it take an enormous amount of time to produce a fossil? Are fossils old? Now I know, yes, 150 is old. But compared to what you hear about millions of years, it certainly is not at all. When you look at fossils, you can't help but be struck by the amazing design. On the left is what we popularly call a sea urchin. And I want to tell you some things about the design and complexity of that in just a moment. So we see its outer shell here, the sea. Sometimes, you know, certain species, we find these on the beach, and people call them a sand dollar. Okay. And on the right is the classic nautiloid design inside a creature like an ammonite or similar to that. Okay. Fossils show great design and complexity. All fossils, even what my evolutionary friends would call the earliest fossils. As a matter of fact, my evolutionary friends believe that sea urchins have been around for 500 million years. They show enormous design and complexity. That's exactly what you would expect since the creation model is true. But you know what? That is totally unexpected if evolution were true. Evolution does not talk about immediate great design. That is something that happens through stepwise refinement. Things have to start off, if you will, simple, and then develop into more complexity. Evolution would state complexity, design, would not arise until much later in the fossil record. But every fossil we find, the very earliest, however you might quantify that, shows enormous design. So, fossils are not immensely old. Now, when I say that, is that going to stop Bill Nye and my evolutionary friends and PBS and National Geographic from saying otherwise? Of course not. But I'm going to show you in a little bit the evidence that supports that. And if nothing else, you've heard a scientist with the PhD after his name say that these things are young. So it's not all scientists, right? Okay? I mean, I got all the letters too. You know what BS stands for? And MS is just more of the same. And PhD is piled higher and deeper. So, yeah, I've got all those letters too, and they work. Good. Now, see, here's the problem. When you take a look at strata, when you take a look at layers like this that might contain fossils, all of the strata layers were produced by water. We find fossils in sedimentary rocks, rocks that were one time sediment suspended in water. And you see this right here. We'll find lots of things in that, but what we don't find is any indication of vast periods of time. My evolutionary friends will say, see each of these layers? That took a long period. That was like one little regional flood. And then you got a long time. And then another little regional flood. And then there's a long time. It doesn't work that way. If there was a long period of time between those layers, we would have had lots of erosion, just like we see today. That, you know, if you drive through the Kettle Moraine area or just drive anywhere, you can see hills and valleys and cuts, etc. The real earth erodes over time. If this layer had hung around for 10,000 years, it would not be smooth and uniformly flat. How long did that layer hang around? Not very long. As a matter of fact, all those layers were deposited rapidly, one after the other, in one year-long worldwide cataclysmic event. And that, of course, is the flood. In creation, the fossils were produced quickly. In evolution, my evolutionary friends said, no, this is long, slow, gradual. But the evidence suggests that the fossils are not immensely old. These layers do not represent vast periods of time. Instead, they show quick. Now again, when we see that, we've all heard the story on PBS. Millions of years. Really? How come those lines are so straight if that's been hanging around for millions of years? Sometimes you can be smarter than a PhD scientist. Now, how do we know what happened in the past? Some of you are familiar with Ken Ham, and one of Ken Ham's favorite quotes is, "Were you there?" In other words, what we do as scientists investigating the past is we have to make assumptions. We have to use something that I call origin science. But you know what? I could never be 100% sure. I can make a good, educated guess about any of these things. How did these shells all get in here, and what were they, etc.? But you know what? I don't have to guess. I have a reliable witness. God in His Word has shared not only creation in Genesis 1, when you stop and think about it, what we really have in Genesis is a great view of the nature of God. It's all there. By the way, I don't think it's an accident that the Bible starts with Genesis. Nor do I think it's an accident that Genesis starts with chapter 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. God was trying to show us this is kind of foundational to the other things that will come. Now, in Genesis 7, that's the Genesis 6 through 9 is the flood. I brought my Bible with me. Sorry, I teach computer science. I mean, I got to have technology. Sorry here. When you read through Genesis 6 through 9, that's the narrative of the flood. Likely we have an incorrect picture of the flood. Many people view the flood as, well, this little it rained a lot, and the waters came up, and we got that routine in our mind, etc. But when you read about it, this is God speaking to Noah, "For in 7 days I will send rain on the earth 40 days and 40 nights, and every living thing that I have made I will blot out from the face of the ground." Noah did all that he was commanded to do. Noah was 600 years old. The animals came into the ark. And by the way, Noah did not go out with a net finding the animals, right? This is a supernatural event. God sent the animals to Noah. And I will caution you, many people are looking for naturalistic explanations. How did Noah build the ark? How did he get the ark? You know what? This is something that God did. The ark is a symbol of God's grace. And that's something that God does. We don't build our own salvation, right? Exactly. In the 600 year, and then again, it talks about the fountains of the great deep were broken up, the windows of heaven. And it also talks about the waters covering the highest mountain. This is a cataclysmic event. Okay, there's the scene. Here's the idea. When some people look at fossils, they will see evolution. When I look at the fossils, I see creation. How could that be? How could two different scientists look at exactly the same thing and come to different conclusions? The answer is it depends upon your interpretation. We're not talking about mathematics here. We're talking about investigating the past. And to do that, we have to provide assumptions. This is an apatosaur vertebrate. It's just one of many, many parts of the backbone in a giant sauropod dinosaur. Some that weighed 80 tons. These are giant things, right? Fortunately, this is just a cast, and they didn't make it the actual weight, so I can pick it up too. That's good. Okay. You've seen this, good, because my laser pointer died. I don't think, does this one work? No, not at all. Some of you have seen this before. Anybody want to say one thing they see?
Fancy lady.
A fancy lady. Okay? Anything else?
Old lady.
An old lady. Some of you may see an old woman. Others you may see a young woman. Okay? If you see an old woman, it's because here's her nose, here's her mouth, her hair is hanging down around her eye hair. Okay? If you see a young woman, it's because you see her with her face turned away. Here's her cheek, here's her nose, here's her eye, here's her ear, there's her choker chain. It's the same thing. It's the same picture. We see two different things. How can that possibly be? Depends upon your assumptions and your interpretations, doesn't it? Exactly. Okay. I have another one here. Maybe some of you have seen this too. You might see a saxophonist who forgot to use his spit valve. And here's his saxophone and his big nose, and he's facing that way, and he's tooting away. Or you might see outline of a woman. Again, look at if you focus on the black to see the image, you'll see one thing. If you focus on the white to see the image, you'll see something else. Good. Wait, you guys are doing it. You got to come to my class. Because when I do this to students, I heard like an, oh yeah, that is so cool. You would not believe it. Where is, I need the president of Concordia University to come down here. Learning is happening right here. This is so cool. See, here's the point. The very existence of fossils at all points to creation. The very existence of fossils points to creation. Fossils are found in fossil graveyards. Maybe some of you have been to, Dinosaur National Monument. There's lots of these areas out west where there are just bones and bones and bones and bones all stacked up here. We have lots of creatures buried rapidly. If that doesn't talk about a flood on a grand scale, I don't know what does. When you stop and think about it, it's hard for the evolution model to figure out where did all these things come from. If evolution is a long, slow, gradual process, how'd that happen? I know how it happened. It happened because of the flood. Now, let's look at the evidence. This is the part where, we'll have to think a little bit about this. I am going to give you 6 lines of reasoning. There is no exam. You don't have to remember these things. But I'm hoping you'll find one, such that when you share your fossil with somebody, and I'm not asking you to go on the street corner, just share it with your grandchildren or somebody at church or a friend or a neighbor or whatever, that you could just mention one thing, and if the conversation turns to God's omnipotence, that's pretty cool. What are the scientific evidences to support the creation model and fossils as a great witness to the creation model? When I start talking too scientifically, then please stop me, okay? Good. You know, my 2 friends, Zeb and Zeke, are in their golden years. I have no idea why we might call it this, okay, because it doesn't seem so golden now that I approach my golden years. But they're getting up in years, and they wanted something to do, so they become Walmart greeters. And they enjoy that job. And during a break one day, Zeb and Zeke sit down, and Zeke says, "Oh, Zeb, today I'm really feeling old. I just feel old." And Zeb says, "Not me, Zeke. As a matter of fact, I feel like a brand new baby." "Get out of here. You're an old coot like me." "No, really, I feel like a brand new baby. Think about it. I don't have any hair. I don't have any teeth, and I'm pretty sure I just wet my pants." Old is kind of relative, isn't it? We get so used to people talking about hundreds of millions and billions of years, we don't even think about it. Okay, let's take a look at the scientific evidence. Number 1, I alerted you to already because I think it's one of the great evidences to support creation. All of the fossils show enormous complexity, great design. And by the way, as a scientist and an engineer, one of my fields is computer science, I will tell you that complexity comes from plan and purpose. A computer system is really complex. That only arises because of design, plan, and purpose. That does not happen by chance. My students wish it did. The night before the program, I said, "Come on!" It doesn't work that way. It takes an enormous amount of thought, effort, foresight, planning, and understanding to create complexity via design. This is exactly what you would expect if the creation model were true. And you know what? The creation model is true. All the fossils, the earliest fossils, the first fossils, whatever you want to say, show great complexity. This is totally unexpected. Charles Darwin didn't believe it. Evolutionary scientists today don't talk about it. See, evolution doesn't talk about complexity right away. Evolution talks about, if I can use the term, simple organisms, and then over time, we don't have any simple organisms in the fossil record. They all show fantastic complexity. These are the eyes of a trilobite. Talk about complexity. Man.
When this happens, when they fossilize, does it happen all at once, or do things mineralize from the outside in, inside out?
Yes. Great question. The question is, does the fossilization happen all at once, or is it? It's typically not all at once. It is typically from outside in. But I'm going to share with you in a little bit that many of the fossils are not fossils. They are actual bone. Okay, which is another indication that they're young. So yeah. Oh, okay. You know what the real answer is to your question? I don't know. Okay, yeah. But the process does in general happen, not all at once. It's not like, a day later. It's about, this will take a period of time. It may take years. Yeah, good question. Here's our sea urchin. Now, I should probably double check on my notes to make sure that I've got all the facts and figures correct. I Again, according to my evolutionary friends, a sea urchin is an extremely old creature. Okay, extremely old. Sea urchins, at one time we thought were kind of slow, dumb, and stupid. Today we've discovered, see, they don't have an eye, at least not like an eye that we've been able to tell. As it turns out, sea urchins do see. Their entire body is an eye. They have cells at the end of all of their tentacles that basically are the equivalent of eyes, and their brains process all these images and put things together. Most animals react to light and have developed a very sophisticated way of seeing complex images. And it goes on to talk about this. In this example, what this means is that sea urchins have several genes that have coded for a widely occurring eye protein. It's all over the place. We've also discovered that sea urchins have a very interesting immune system. And we're just discovering all the intricacies of that and realizing this might be helpful for modern medicine. Okay? We've also you got to stop me now because this is not a science class. But you know, let's think about evolution and creation a little bit. If evolution were simple to complex, then we ought to see that in a number of different ways. For example, the number of genes. Human beings have 23 pairs of genes. We have 46 total genes, right? Sea urchins, much simpler, much more ancient, right? You bet. They have 22 pairs. There is no correlation between. There are some creatures with hundreds of genes, some with just dozens. There's no evolutionary ladder here of simple to complex. Sorry, doesn't exist. If anybody tells you about simple life, if you happen to get one of the little sea urchin ones here and they want to tell, no, extremely complex. The diversity of life. The creation model would indicate that at the very beginning of creation, we should have extremely diverse, that is, different kinds of life. The creation model says at the beginning, God created different kinds of life. And you know what? That's exactly what we see. We see initial great diversity. These are just some of the creatures found in a formation known as the Burgess Shale in Canada. And they are so bizarre and so different from not only each other, but things that exist today, we don't even know how to classify them. You've probably seen that one before, but the other ones, they are so diverse, we just can't even believe it there. As a matter of fact, even evolutionary scientists call this the Cambrian explosion. The lowest, earliest fossil-bearing strata contains every phyla that currently exists on planet Earth. Every body plan that exists today, we find a representative sample of in those rocks. Interesting. Again, the evolution model would say that's not the way it's supposed to work. One of the most famous evolutionary scientists of the 20th century, Stephen Jay Gould, said, the fossil record is a non-Darwinian event. That's an interesting thing to say, coming from an evolutionary paleontologist, right? What's he saying? We can't see evolution in the fossil record. It doesn't match up with what we expect. You're right, because it perfectly matches with creation. When folks try to recreate some of those creatures, we know that here's the one with 5 eyes, okay? And here's the walking toothpick. And yeah, we don't even know. Answer, initial great diversity. And God created the different kinds. All together at the same time. Okay, there were a couple days in between a couple of these. That's a creation joke. All right, what's the other thing we notice? In the fossil record, we notice discontinuity. Sorry. See, scientists use big words, right? Mainly because we hope you won't ask any more questions. Okay? Okay. Discontinuity just means there's a break. They are discontinuous. There's not a continuous transition. When God created life, He created life in such a way that it could diversify. We call this natural selection. Some folks are panicking. They say, well, that's Charles Darwin. No. Natural selection was originally a creationary idea. In its modern form, it was put together by a creationary scientist 25 years before Darwin did it. And his name was Edward Blyth. Creation talks about the diversity of life, but within limits. So we know there are lots of different dog kinds. They're all descended from the ancestral dog kind. We call them breeds today. There are lots of different cat breeds. Again, all descended from ancestral cat kind. But what we don't have today is we don't have dats, cogs. I don't know, what's the cat dog? What do we call it? Okay? See, we don't have to worry about it because they don't exist. And guess what? They don't exist in the fossil record either. There are no transitional forms. Now, when I say that, typically somebody's going to jump up. Question, comment.
Yeah, I had a question. How many, so like, back in the beginning, when God created things, how many like breeds were there?
Great question. That is an awesome question. The answer is?
I don't know.
Now, but I do want to carry on with this. One of the organizations I'm a member of is the Creation Research Society, and we have a group called the Baraminology Research Group. What they do is that's the exact question they're investigating. I'll go off on a tangent just a little bit. We use the word species today. That's not what God created. God did not create different species. He created kinds. Hebrew word is min. Baraminology comes from two Hebrew words, bara, or bara means created, and min, which means kind. So there are creation scientists investigating what were the kinds, and what are both the, I was going to say morphological, can you believe that? What are the, I don't know, the outward appearances, how things are different, and their chemical differences, and there's some really smart folks that think we can come to that. Now, how many different dog kinds did God originally create? As a matter of fact, from a single dog kind that could have looked like a wolf or coyote, all these breeds developed. Great question. I'm tired of saying I don't know those, so no more questions. Discontinuity. Now, when I say there are no transitional forms, somebody will usually jump up in the audience and say, but what about the whale with legs? And what about the Archaeopteryx? And what about all this? You know what? Don't go there. Okay? Just don't. It's just not real stuff. When you look at it, all this stuff, the PBS specials, how many PBS specials have you seen about the so-called walking whale on land, had all these things? No. Okay? We don't even find anything like that. We're using a lot of imagination. And imagination is good, but you need to be careful. Even evolutionary scientists will tell you there are precious few transitional forms. Let's just allow that there may be some. If evolution were true, there shouldn't be any way to distinguish one group from another. If evolution were true, there is no discontinuity because everything is just one thing developing into something else, right? There'd be more cogs and dats than there would be either dogs or cats, right? Our modern classification system was developed by a Lutheran creationary scientist, Carl Linnaeus. What they didn't tell you in class when you learned about Linnaean genus and species is that Carl was not only a Lutheran, but also a creationary scientist. He said the only way we could identify creatures is if there are gaps between them. If there were no gaps, we wouldn't know where does one end, the other one begin. The whole taxonomy, current biology, is built on a creation foundation. Discontinuity? You bet. Well, by the way, usually somebody wants to talk about what? Dinosaurs. Dinosaurs evolved into, anybody know what dinosaurs evolved into in the evolution model? Birds! Dinosaurs evolved into birds. Neat trick. Here's a piece of dinosaur find, and in the stomach, this is so well preserved that we can even tell the bones in the stomach of this dinosaur, and guess what it was eating for lunch? Birds. Yeah, no, not with eating birds. Exactly. Really hard to, yeah, well, you see the story, right? All these things existed at exactly the same time. We don't have dinosaurs changing into birds. We have both dinosaurs and birds existing from the very beginning. The big difference between creation and evolution deals with this time frame of history. Creation says, this is a, I laugh when I use this term, but I have to contrast with evolution. Creation is somewhat recent. Now, in fact, if you ask me, being a scientist, I always talk about the universe and Earth are less than 10,000 years old. Many people would say, well, that's too long. You're right. Martin Luther put the date of creation at 3900 BC, so I'm probably a little long there. But at the same token, science, we deal in powers of 10, so that's about right. 10,000 years is an enormous amount of time, right? You bet. But compared to evolution, it's nothing, of course. Here's the big difference between the two models. Creation says this is a recent formation of life. Evolution says these are ancient formations of life. Now, what can we say to indicate that things are recent? Let me skip ahead because I want to give credit to this person. This is my colleague Mark Armitage. Although his hair is grayer, he's not older than me, so that's okay. He's sitting in front of his personal scanning electron microscope. How many people have a SEM, a scanning electron microscope? Yeah, not too many people do, I agree. He's a world-class microscopist. Yes, that's what, I don't know. Okay. Mark Armitage is one of the leading scientists dealing with soft tissue in dinosaurs. Not too long ago, Mark and a team from the Creation Research Society unearthed a Triceratops horn. And guess what we find inside this? Number one, it's not all rock. It's not just minerals. We find inside this soft tissue. We find inside this cells. Osteocytes, if I've got it correct. Bone filament cells. Now, what does that mean? It means that this fossil is not millions of years old. Trust me, soft tissue does not hang around for hundreds of millions of years. Now, nobody pays attention to my colleague Mark Armitage because he's a creationary scientist. But there's an evolutionary scientist saying the same thing, and that's Dr. Mary Schweitzer. When she first published her results about the same time that Mark published his, I mean, the evolutionary community just lambasted her. You're mistaken. They said, hey, you dug up that dinosaur, but there was contamination. That wasn't the dinosaur blood cell. It was your own blood in there. No. She has done this too often, and other people have, and Mark Armitage has done this too much. That is not contamination. There is actual living material inside these fossils. Is any dinosaur 65 million years old? No way. Maybe you can stretch your imagination and think about this material lasting in the right condition for a few thousand years. There's no way it's lasting for 1 million years. Don't happen. If you're on Facebook and look up the backyard microscope? I don't know. Mark Armitage, send me a mail message, I'll send you the link. Here's the other thing that we have done. My colleagues in the Creation Research Society have done things that no evolutionary scientists ever thought to do because it wouldn't make sense in their model. Carbon-14 is a type of radiometric dating, but it only works on, quote, recent things. Even evolutionary scientists will say that carbon-14 only works for maybe 50,000 years or something like that. So, of course, the dinosaurs are millions of years old. Guess what? Carbon-14 dating can be done because there still is radioactive carbon in it. It hasn't all decayed. It's not that old. And guess what? These bones are not millions of years old. They are thousands of years old. You know what my strange colleagues in the Creation Research Society did? They took a diamond from the Rappa mines in South Africa. And you've heard the De Beers commercials, right? Diamonds, millions of years developing in the earth. You know what they did? They carbon dated them. Guess what? They're not millions of years old. They're thousands of years old. Now, that didn't surprise you because you've heard it on the nightly news. You've seen it on the PBS special. It was a cover story in Time magazine. Oh, wait. No, it wasn't. Because it doesn't match their idea. Order. In the evolution model, fossils are thought to be a record of the appearance of life over time. Ancient life, mid-life, recent life. That's an interesting story. In the creation model, all of the fossils were formed at about the same time. Now, I don't want you to think that every single fossil was formed by Noah's flood. That's not true. But the vast majority of the record, much of the fossils were formed at one time. Now, this is kind of interesting. On the left here, we have some fossils. On the right are the living. Anybody know what these things on the left are? They look like starfish. You're right. They are starfish. My evolutionary friends will say, those are 450 million years old. How do you know they're starfish? Well, they look like starfish. The same starfish we have today? Exactly. It's a funny thing when you look at the fossil record. Fossil dragonflies look like dragonflies. Fossil bats look like? No, Christian Bale. Exactly. We know what many of these things look like because there they are. Exactly. No change. Really. Really. See, my evolutionary friends will say this. Think of the fossil forms as a succession of life, different events over time. But yet what we see in the record here, the order isn't one of succession from simple to complex. The only order we see is a massive burial, the death of countless organisms here. The fossil forms, the ones that are still extant, that is, they're still living, appear just like their modern counterparts. Now, unfortunately, we do know that many things have gone extinct. As far as we know, there are no dinosaurs roaming the earth. They are extinct. As far as we know, there are no trilobites. They are extinct. But for every modern example, we have the fossil example also. See, my evolutionary friends get all concerned because they look in the fossil record in a layer that they believe is 350 million years old. They see this fossil. And they don't see it at any higher level. So they say, well, it's gone. It's extinct. And it was until fishermen drug it up in a net in 1938. This is the coelacanth, one of hundreds of so-called living fossils. See, if you think the record is one of ancient time and blah, 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 then yeah, you say, okay, 350 million years old, it still exists today. That's interesting. Now, finally, we all talk about the fossil record as a record. But here's my question to you. What is it a record of? The fossil record is a record. What is it a record of? You bet. It's an unfortunate record of death. The evolution model says this. The fossil record is the record of the development of organisms over time. Think about the fossil record as like birth certificates. Boom! Here's a, what is this guy again? Trilobite. They're born, they just developed 550 million years ago. And boom, kangaroos. They developed 30 million years ago, and whatever it might be. It's the record of the birth, the origin of things over time. Question?
What about adaptation?
Sure. And
Well, people that are exposed to sun all the time, their skin is gonna get darker
Yes.
because of melatonin.
Yep.
Their nose is gonna fly
Yeah,
because
yeah.
of the air.
have to be careful because when I'm exposed to the sun, my skin does not get dark, it just gets red. Okay, yeah. Adaptation is a real thing. And yes, what we see in the fossil record, and I didn't want to indicate, we do see variation, right? There's variation among the starfish, and there is such a thing as adaptation. And that's what a creationary scientist would call natural selection. Yeah, you bet. Sir?
With the flood, if all of humanity died, how come we don't find more fossils of humans?
Great question. Let me answer that, but let me answer it in the context of this here. Okay, yeah, that's, why don't we find more fossil humans? We actually do, but let me talk about it in this context. So, we got what the evolution model says? It's the origin of these creatures. The creation model says, no, this is not their birth certificate, this is their death certificate. The fossil record is a record of death. It's a record of God's judgment upon the planet. What we see here is not the development of organisms over time. What we see here is God's judgment on life, unfortunately, right? It's not a record of origin, it's a record of death. And just think about it anyway. If you wanted to find out somebody's origin, would it be better to look in the graveyard or in the maternity ward? If you want to find out about their origin, it'd be better to look at the birth certificate, not the death certificate. And unfortunately, fossils are just a doleful reminder that there was a worldwide cataclysm, and the result of that cataclysm was man's sin. Here's the moral of the story, and I haven't forgotten about the human fossils. But the purpose of the doctrine of creation, the purpose of fossils, is to point to Christ. The only reason to talk about creation at all is to point people to the Creator. You know, sometimes arguing is a lot of fun. Sometimes learning about new things is a lot of fun. But trust me, this whole idea of fossils and creation really has no purpose if it's not to point people to the Creator. Here's how I use it. When I'm asked questions by an honest skeptic, by the way, there are plenty of people that don't really want to hear an answer, you know? They just want to argue. This is why I don't do debates anymore. If you think about it, are you going to change that other person's mind? No. If you're an honest skeptic and you have some real questions, then I'm going to use the doctrine of creation and fossils, if I can, to remove those barriers. Well, wait, well, I was told, oh yeah? Were you told about the soft tissue inside dinosaur fossils? No. You thought about it this way. I'm going to use that to remove the barriers. Now, honestly, it's not my job to convert anyone. That's the Holy Spirit's job. My job is to make disciples, and one way I know to do that is by sharing this information that points back to Christ Himself. Fossils really support the creation model. They support the idea that God created everything. And when you're sharing your little fossil, when you come up here, this is a skin imprint of a dinosaur, so we kind of know what their skin looks like because of things like this. But when you're sharing fossils with them, you've got a fantastic story to share. I mean, not only are dinosaurs and trilobites and fish, but none of that interesting, but we can use that to point to an even greater story. You know? I mean, I had a third grader ask me, well, why did God kill all these animals? What kind of loving God is that? You know why? I can tell you. It's because of our sinfulness. Well, that's not, I know it's not fair, is it? But just think, when you're mean to somebody else, that not only hurts you, it hurts them. Everybody suffers. We willfully separated ourselves from God. And because of that, God pronounced judgment. Now, God could have legitimately said, they all go to hell. Wipe them all out. He didn't. Fossils are a reminder that not only of God's judgment, but also of His grace. He did provide a way out for Noah, his wife, his 3 sons, their wives, and a representative sample of all the land creatures, and we were talking about walruses earlier, perhaps on the ark too. What a beautiful picture of grace. What did Noah do to earn that? Not a thing. We could share that story. That works for everybody, doesn't it? You know what? Yeah, this didn't deserve to die, and we don't deserve to live. But God in His grace has provided that for us. So when you see a fossil, when you share a fossil, think more about just this thing. Yeah, it's all interesting. But it's really a way to share a story. And that's your personal history, connected back in a chain, not only to Noah, but also to Adam. And how's that genealogy go? The son of Adam, the son or daughter of God. That's a great story. Good for you. Now, let's talk about some of these things here. First of all, question about why don't we find more people as fossils? And I just told you about Zeb and Z. You see me, what are you talking about? I got plenty of old fossils. You're too kind. One of the things that makes, for some Christians, makes this difficult is evolutionary scientists will harp on this so-called fossil progression and succession. You know, there are no bones of people in those low layers. The complex things are at the higher levels. As a matter of fact, that's explained by a couple different phenomena in the flood. Realize that the flood was a cataclysmic event. First of all, we might not expect people fossils and other fossils mixed together. Today, people don't live where there are lions and tigers like right next door, right? We kind of keep our distance. Secondly, people are more mobile. There'd be a way for them, if there was a rising flood water, there might be a way for them to escape, at least temporarily. So it's true, we don't find as many fossil people as we find fossil starfish. The other thing to point out is more than 90% of all the fossils are marine creatures. They're sea life during the cataclysmic burial that was happening under the sea. So now that I've said the little bit that indicates I don't really know the answer, I'll just stick with that one. First of all, people are more mobile. They live in different ecosystems. Some could have perhaps attempted to ride out the flood. Remember, if you weren't buried in it initially and covered with sediment, you're not going to form a fossil, right? If you were caught in the floodwaters and just drowned, you're not going to become a fossil necessarily. Don't know if that helps. Let me say one thing about the flood and the water, because this is a fairly common question. And then if we have time for questions, Katie?
A few,
Okay,
yeah.
a few. That's good. Let me use all my time then. There won't be. So I get this question a lot. But you claim there was a worldwide flood on planet Earth. Where'd all the water go? I honestly don't know how to answer that question. Let's look at that data. 71% of the surface of planet Earth is covered with water, more water than land. Let's take a little body of water, Lake Superior. Do you know how much water is in Lake Superior? If you took all the water out of Lake Superior, it would cover North, Central, and South America to a depth of 1 foot. The deepest trench in the ocean is much deeper than the highest mountain. Is there enough water on planet Earth that and by the way, the landforms were different before the flood. This is a cataclysm. The fountains of the great deep sprung up, mountains are coming up, going up, down, da-da-da-da-da. The earth looks very different today than before the flood, for sure. But there's plenty of water. Now, here's my final story. It's not meant to be a joke, but you may laugh. When I talk to my evolutionary friends, they'll deny that there was a global flood on planet Earth. You know why? That sounds like the Bible. And I don't believe the Bible, and I'm not going to have anything to do with that. At the same time, they will say, you know what? There was a global, worldwide flood on Mars. Thanks for laughing. How much water on Mars today? Not much. That's a good answer, okay? Now, why do they think that? Because the evidence of water action is there. There is evidence on the topology of Mars that something, wind or water or something, was carving all this stuff. It's very common to talk about a worldwide flood on Mars, but not on planet Earth. Funny stuff.